Welcome to Alpha Centurion. This is Alpha. All right, so this week we're going to be going over 9 stories. Let's get into it. So the first story, or the first thing I want to talk about, is The Green Knight. I finally saw that movie. It is weird. That is a weird movie. The first time I was introduced to The Green Knight, and by the way, I love King Arthur. I have the Morte Arthur. But the first time I ran into him, into the Green Knight, that is, and Sir Gawain, was in junior high when they made us read it for class. And I wasn't a big reader back then. I didn't get into reading until maybe my senior year, maybe my junior year in high school. When I read it in class, the story was about chivalry and about what happens when the merits and rewards for living up to your code, and how at the same time you shouldn't be too attached to extreme standards. But in this movie, it's a little bit different. In this movie, the character of Sir Gawain keeps failing, and they do some switcheroos here. So instead of Morgan Le Fay being his aunt, it's now his mother, and this kind of stuff, and the chivalric kissing, it becomes more erotic, and there's more of a, we'd call it a homosexual undertone with the relationship with well, it would be a spoiler to say who, but let's just say with one of the other characters. For a deeper dive into this, obviously I'd recommend reading Sir Gawain, in The Green Knight. I'd also recommend listening to Story Dive and the channel Mythology and Fiction Explained. All right, so next I'd like to talk about Titans. Titans this week was, I don't know, better, interesting. The character playing Raven, her look changed extremely this week. I don't know. Like for a second, I thought it was a different actress playing her. If something like that happened, I don't know about it. I don't know about any recasting. And they had the bats save Dick from death. And they also tried magic, and they end up using the Lazarus pit. So it ends up being all 3 things that was set up, except for they even did the will of the soul thing to survive. Was the episode good? I don't know. It was too much of a shift change for me to tell you if it was good on its own. I'd have to rewatch it on its own, away from the show, to really give a gauge on whether or not this episode stands on its own. But unless they're going to actually set up either Dick Grayson as in the Batman outfit, or they're going to have Bruce Wayne return as Batman, which I have a feeling that just like no flights, no tights, I think that there might be some kind of contractual stipulation where that can't happen. I don't know how this story is going to end, because it's doing the original storyline where Tim Drake is going to have to become Robin, and there has to be a Batman stand-in. So I don't know what they're going to do for that. That being said, I do recommend watching Titans this week. It was a fun watch. Just weird. Just really, really weird. Continuing with another one that Boba also talks about, let's talk about Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol this week had a Lady Gaga in the past type thing, which that didn't really work. But the time travel aspect was very fun. The Sisterhood of Dada, away from the insanity of the Doom Patrol, except for that one Lady Gaga reference, was great. It was much more serious, much more grounded, while still being fantastical, while still being humorous. And the Sisterhood of Dada was kind of the better version of the Doom Patrol. All in all, it was good. It was good. It wasn't great, but it was a very strong episode. And I think they are doing the storyline where the psychiatrist construct does try to take control of the body of Kay, of the little girl. So I think that is what's happening in there. Again, really strong performances from everybody. The actor who's in the suit that of the robot, I feel bad for, because obviously he never gets any actual camera time because it's a different actor doing the voice. Doom Patrol and Titans were great this week. It was a better week for DC fandom. I think it's very telling that the toy lines, whether it's for Transformers, whether it's for He-Man, whether it's for um, G.I. Joe, or for Batman, or for DC, or for Marvel and X-Men, it isn't the current iterations that are selling hot items that are selling off the shelf. It's the reiterations, or the more accurate versions of the toys from the 1980s, of the more accurate versions of the forms and transformers and styles of the 1980s versions of the characters, not the reinterpretations of today. Either A, you need to leave good enough alone and just realize that these characters don't work in a newly translated form, or B, you do like what a lot of good writing does, which is keep growing. When DC had legacy characters, it made more sense. But you can't have every legacy character be a female, and every legacy character be gay, and every legacy character be perfect right out the box. Let them struggle. One of the things that made Wolverine so great was that he was super flawed. One of the things that made, speaking of Titans, having Dick Grayson become Batman so great is that he wasn't as sharp or as bright as Batman. One of the great things about Batman Beyond is that Batman's son isn't Batman, but he is Batman. It's the spirit of the bat kind of thing. One of the greatest characters, Laura Kinney, Wolverine's daughter. I mean, all those stories worked. It's still a female character. It's still a bisexual character. But the story develops strong. It develops well. It's within continuity, and it makes sense from where the character started to where the character went. They have, in DC, they have John being bisexual now, and Tim Drake being bisexual now. The Tim Drake thing is kind of like, who cares, right? Whichever Robin it is. The Superboy, who's now Superman, I guess, being bisexual, if A, just make him gay, and B, don't have him be Superman, have him be Superboy, have Connor be Superman. I mean, that's who earned the mantle of Superman, was Connor. Connor earned that in multiple realities. Or even Superboy Prime, bring him back, right? But the character of John, I mean, if he's going to fall in love with anyone, it would be Damian. Okay? Older Damian, the Batman with the trench coat. That's who John falls in love with. Not some random wannabe SJW Lewis Lane knockoff that's a guy, or whatever, non-gender or non-binary, but male in presentation. No, don't do that. Have him fall in love with the character that the story has set him up to think of as loving. Have him be in love with Damian. There's more conflict there. There's more story there. Yeah, that means that both Damian and John have to be aged up, but you already aged them up for this stupid storyline that's going on now that no one's buying. So if you're going to have them be adult characters, if you're going to have Batman's son Damian be Batman, if you're going to have Superman's son John be Superman, have the seeds that were planted in the older stories, which are now only 5 or 6 years old, but you're acting like as if they're 30-year-old stories, have those seeds pay off now. That's what makes it interesting. It makes people want to keep reading. So now let's talk about Christopher Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day and Bartolome de las Casas. And I was actually going to post up a picture. Maybe if I find it, I'll put it somewhere on here. But it's been destroyed by my cats. But I think I have it somewhere. Of my grandmother, of my great grandmother. She's Native American, like Native American. And you have this little Mexican kid sitting right next to his Native American grandmother, great grandmother. And it's this beautiful picture. Her kids, her children, are still part of the tribe. They're still Native American. They're actively members. The great grandchildren, I should say, of her are now still active members. I'm not. Just like with my Sephardic ancestry on my father's side, with my Native American ancestry on my mother's side, I don't live a Native American lifestyle. I don't belong to an official role in or an official list of a tribe, whether Sephardic Judaism or Native American tribalism. I'm not. I'm American, which it is what it is. So I have, for a very long time, going back to junior high, thought that it would be appropriate to have a Native American Day or an Indigenous Peoples Day or whatever it is you want to call it. And mind you, I'm 40, so I'm talking like in the 1990s, I thought this was a good idea. But that doesn't mean I think we should discount or not give credit to Christopher Columbus, because I like existing, and I don't exist if only my mother's side of the family is here in America. I need the Spaniards to get over here, and to speak English, I need the English to get over here. So no, I don't hate the fact that the quote-unquote colonizers came here, or that the Christians came here, or that the Catholics came here. I'm Catholic. I'm aware of the history, and I'm still Catholic. So just to kind of give you kind of a brief primer on this and give you guys some recommendations, I'm going to recommend you watch a channel called Patheos. It's going to, I think the guy's name is Casey, Breaking the Habit. It's going to have him on the episode. And then for reading recommendations, I'm going to recommend you read Christopher Columbus, The Four Voyages. There's good stuff. It's a little bit of propaganda, but it's good stuff. And it'll give you an idea of who Christopher Columbus really was and what he really did. I will recommend you read Bartolome de las Casas, a short account of the destruction of the Indies. Basically, there's a lot of people who, and I remember this when I went to college, there's a lot of people who just automatically hate this guy. You just say his name and they automatically get angry. When I was in my Latin American philosophy class, they were like, "Oh, you like this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I read his book before the class started. Like, I just read it the summer before that semester started, and I was all excited." And then they're like, everybody in the class hated him, and I was like, "Dude, he's great. He's talking for, how the Indians need to be treated like people and need to be treated like equals." But okay, and then to understand the resentment, I'm also going to recommend you read Bernal Diaz, The Conquest of New Spain. So if this guy sounds like a hero, this guy is going to sound like a villain. But they're not. It's just what happened, and it's important to know the history. So on this channel, we talk religion a lot, usually Christianity. And we talk Christianity and religion a little bit more than I want to, actually. Originally, I wanted this channel to be about martial arts, and then philosophy, and then philosophy of religion just took over, and now there's been outright apologetics on this channel, right? Let's talk about Buddhism. Religion for Breakfast has a new series starting where they're talking about Buddhism, and Buddhism's a real interesting religion. A lot of people like to compare the Buddha to Jesus. I don't think that's an apt comparison at all. I don't think they would get along in the way that people in the pop culture want to say that they would. No, they wouldn't. Jesus has very unique ideas, and Buddhism, while seeming compatible, is not. They're not synchronistic with Christianity, but they're close. A lot of the ideas are very peaceful. To put it in simply, the idea that everything is suffering is kind of central to both religions, right? But the answer is different. Jesus is the one true way. There are many Buddhas, right? So it's a very different formula. Watch Religion for Breakfast and get a feel for it. And my recommended reads is going to be the Buddhist scriptures. These come later, but they're still interesting to know how people think of the Buddha. So I would recommend reading that. This is from Penguin Classics. And I would also recommend The Sayings of the Buddha by Oxford University Press. There are other collections of The Saying of the Buddha, but I'd recommend these two as a place to get started so you can understand what Buddhism is actually about and quit thinking that it's a discount Christianity, because it's not. Now let's continue on with the flood story. I know that some of the links were dead in my previous video of this because I didn't put in the links, I just put in the titles of the episodes. So I will try to fix that if I get a chance to, if I remember to. But let's talk about part 2 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where he gets deeper into the Christian, Catholic, and theological understanding through reason of Noah's flood. And to understand this, I would actually recommend you read the Casas. Go read a different take on the flood story and see where the parallels are and are not. You can also read the Epic of Gilgamesh, because it's mildly mentioned there, but it's so mild you'll miss it if you're not looking for it, to be honest about it. The flood narrative can be taken in multiple ways. It can be taken as a global flood and 100% literal. It can be taken as a local flood that covered a wide expanse, maybe all of the Middle East, or maybe all of the area between the Tigris and the Euphrates, especially near the lower end of that geographic area of Babylon. So, and of course you can take it as the every flood story, where the story is completely allegorical. For me, I like the second theory. I like the idea that it was a localized large flood, but that there were other floods in different cultures that were similar, and that all these stories kind of combine and intermix through travel, and the story builds up over time, and that a real Noah may have existed, but the Noah that we have in the Bible is probably a composite character with elements of whoever the real person was, and elements of these different mythical figures from different cultures, and different real historical figures from different cultures who would have survived the flood. And again, I made this argument in other videos, but for proof of this, watch a video of any time it floods here in the US or anywhere in the West. In the video itself, it looks like the entire world is underwater. That's with modern technology. That's with modern understanding. It still looks like someone's whole world's underwater. So let's give a little bit more credit to the writers of the Bible, and to the writers and crafters of the Noah story and the Noah narrative, because they were giving out moral and ethical and theological truths inspired by God. If you're Christian, remember that part, that we still have to hold that as true. But in what way is it true? Well, I'm going to argue that it's theologically and morally and ethically true, and that the analogies and compositeness doesn't discount the fact that there was a real flood, localized or not, and that there was a real Noah, whether his name was Noah or not, whether it was At-Hasis or some other name. All right, anyway, let's move on. Okay, so in previous videos, I have a letter from, and this is just basically topics that come out on some of the live streams I guest on. And I'm going to call this one Answering Leo. This is going to be 2 parts. This is going to be number 8, which is going to be Answering Leo. And this is from the Gur Streams episode, Walking On, and he adds more to it. And this is going to be Western civilization has a unique set of Christian values attached to it. So there are several arguments here that Leo and Danny didn't quite seem to understand, which is, I'm not arguing that these ideas came out of nowhere, they came out of a vacuum. I mean, I'm someone who's arguing for the Noah story right now, and I'm admitting that there's composite stuff, and that the story itself gets its themes and ideas and events from other stories, such as the At-Hasis, and that the literary development of a historical event, develops over time and gathers more gravitas as it goes on, right? So same thing with the morals. So, they're using this kind of atheistic Vosh argument about socialistic Vosh argument about a drowning child, right? That's not the point. The point is not when did morals develop, because at one point morals were not developed. At one point there were, through the evolution of morals, there was a group that didn't believe in saving the drowning child, and a group that did believe in saving the drowning child, and apparently the group that believed in saving the drowning child are the ones whose morals survive to this day. But there are people even today who don't have those ethics, right? There are psychopaths today and sociopaths who wouldn't have the urge to save the child. And then there's the passerby problem, which is that some people won't act until someone else acts, or even if someone else acts, they assume that that other person will take care of it, and so they won't help. They're just bystanders. They're just witnesses, right? So there's a whole lot of complicated things that go on there. But that doesn't discount the fact that we have uniquely Christian morals in Western society, especially in the U.S. We are a Christian nation. We're founded by people who believed in Christ. You might not like that. You might want to say that they were secularist or that they were only theist. But theism at that time meant Christianity. They weren't Muslims. They weren't, they even used the word Mohammedans. They weren't Mohammedans. They were Christians. They had Christian ideas, Christian ideals. And these ideals go back to, yes, Christ, but then it goes back before that to Judaism. And then before Judaism, there's influence from the Semitic cultures, and influence from Babylon, and from Sumer, and from the Canaanites, and from Phoenicia, and from the Hittites. Like, all this stuff influences, right? And Egypt is not the big, strong influence, even though everybody wants to say it is. Egypt is definitely a influence. So is Greek philosophy, right? But these are all Western ideas. But you can't say that these are the ideas of Buddhist, or these are the ideas of Taoist. These branches or trees of morality grow up on their own with their own standards. Some of them are similar, some of them are parallel, some of the ideas come at different times. Like the pyramids that are created in Egypt and the pyramids that are created in Peru, they're not the same pyramids, they're not by the same people, they're not the same design. Yes, the Mesoamerican pyramids are amazing. Yes, the Aztec pyramids are amazing, but they're created at a different time with different structures, with different designs, with slightly different purposes, and slightly different theologies and mythologies surrounding them, different gods surrounding them. Parallel, but not the same. Same thing with morality. Yes, there are parallel moralities, but they're not exactly the same, and their justifications are not the same, and the punishments for misbehaving are not the same. The 300 hells or the 1,000 hells in China are not the same as the idea of hell in Christianity, in the American idea of hell, or the Western idea of hell. They're very different. And to illustrate this, I want to recommend, first I want to recommend two books, okay? And I've actually recommended this book also to one of Gar's viewers. I recommended this one and another book that I probably shouldn't have recommended, but this one I do recommend for understanding this. And this is going to be History of the Ancient World. And what I like about this book is that it's not Eurocentric, so it'll show you how Greece was developing, how Rome was developing, how Asia was developing, how India was developing, and it shows you different branches of development from different cultures and how they parallel and how they differ. To finish off, the other thing that I would like for you to look at is from Penguin Classics on writing history, from Herodotus to Herodian. I really do recommend something like this so you can see how history is written and developed. Because you need to understand that to understand how the Bible develops, how the Bible goes from epic history, epic narrative to history. For instance, the epic narratives are written most likely after the histories are written. So the histories, the Chronicles and the Kings and all that is written leading up into the kingdom of David. David then is around, and David exists, and David has his kingdom, and that's probably, according to most secular academics, is when the older stuff was written. And then other narratives would have been written after or during the captivity in Babylon. And so you're pulling back to these ideas and myths, and you're writing polemics against them. And you're creating these epic narratives that define the theology of your faith. And they're not one single collection. They're a bunch of different scrolls kept in jars, and they're not a single book. And this canon, this read, is just different stories that are put together. Not everyone has the same sets of stories. Not everyone has a complete copy, and they have to be all written by hand. It's this great development that happens in the telling and retelling of the Bible, and the learning and the knowledge, and how custom and tradition has to protect the development of the doctrine to make sure that nothing goes too far afield, and that it's all within orthodoxy, and not heretical or heterodoxy. That's amazing stuff, and you miss that if you're an atheist and you just say something like in my next story where the guy goes, well, it's just all these different opinions, but it's not. So let's get into that. So let's get into my last story of the day, and then after this I'm going to have one more recommendation specifically for a viewer, for a person who I talked to on Gar Streams named Lisa. But first I want to talk to Jason. And again, this is where I do those letters, a letter from a fan kind of thing. So I'm going to answer Jason, and this is the fiery whatever episode of Ger Streams. And I'm going to be explaining why apostolic tradition matters to Christian development and modern Christian thought. And I'm going to explain orthodoxy to Jason. So mainline Protestantism, and that's going to include Calvinism, Lutheranism, Anglicanism, Presbyterian. All of these are mainline Christianities, and they are going to draw from traditional Christianity, which is going to be the Western Catholic Church and the Eastern Catholic Church, which in the West is sometimes also called by Protestants, and even sometimes by themselves, the Orthodox Church. And the Orthodox Church is the survivors of the Orthodox Church, because there were, I don't know, what's 77 divided by 2, right? But there are 12 original churches that survive. Of these original 12 patriarchs, only Rome and Antioch and Constantinople, even though no longer in Constantinople, Jerusalem, Egypt, somewhere in Egypt, I don't know where, Ethiopia, only like 6, and there's an Oriental church somewhere as well that survives, and each one of these were founded by a different apostle. Anyway, and that tradition or school of tradition is where we get the Gospels, right? Okay, so the development aside, what's important to understand is that once the canon was formed, once the Septuagint and the new canon from the Septuagint is going to be an Egyptian edition, a Greek Koine edition, and then Koine Greek becomes the main language in the New Testament, and that's why it's not written in Aramaic. There's this synergy thing going on, right? And there's this thing called the synagogue church split, which is where the Jews and the Christians are no longer one community. Well, then heresies start to develop. Gnosticism starts to rise. Arianism starts to rise. Different types of heresies, right? So orthodoxy is going to tie into the Jewish orthodoxy. And then the radicalization or the zealotry of Christianity is going to change some of that. And before Constantine, before later emperors after Constantine will legalize and then later make the official religion Christian, long before that development, Christianity itself has to fight off these heresies, these later ideas that pop up, okay? And so what we do is we look back to a group of people called the Church Fathers. And I would recommend reading that. There's the Apostolic Fathers, Volume 1 or 2. There's an Oxford Press version. There's a Penguin version. The one that I'm reading right now is from Loeb Classics. But then there's one man in particular who really defines what's orthodoxy and what's heresy. And it's this guy, Irenaeus. And if you want to know what Christians believe, what modern Christians believe, you have to go back to this guy. This is the guy who defines what's heresy and what's not. It's very important. There are other church fathers who do this too, but this guy against heresies is the main one. John Christensen is another one that's very important. I'd also recommend reading this right here, The Emergence of Catholic Tradition from 100 to 600 AD. And if you want something a little bit more simpler, You can do any of the very short introductions by Oxford University Press. This one happens to be Orthodox Christianity, but you can do Introduction to the Bible, Introduction to the New Testament, Introduction to Catholicism, whatever. And I'd also recommend the Essential Guide to the Holy Bible. This is by Libra Edicta Valentina. This is from the USCCB Publishing for the Catholics, so you can kind of understand how we understand the Bible and what that's about. So just like how with morals, you need to understand that they develop from other threads, but that doesn't mean that the morals aren't true. Yeah, Christianity develops from Judaism, and Judaism has its influences from other cultures that it interacted with. It's just like saying today, well, like, yeah, there's unique American values, but America and China have trade. Like, I'm married to a Chinese woman, so yeah, there's some Chinese influence in my house. That doesn't mean that I'm not a completely American. That doesn't mean that I don't have unique American ideas. Jason, I just thought I'd explain that a little bit better for you. That was this week's episode of Something Something. If anyone wants a better title for the show, please suggest it down below. Please comment, please like, please share. Hope to hear from you all. Hopefully my audience continues to grow. And Lisa, I have a recommendation for you. Read Eusebius, The History of the Church. Okay? This guy's a Christian and a Catholic. This guy wrote about the year 300, give or take. He was born in 260. He died in 339. He writes a really good history. It's really good. I recommend reading this so you can understand how the church actually developed and what actually happened. Peace.